continuous integration, this is where every time a software developer makes code changes and checks it into the source code repository, the entire system is built and compiled and run against a set of automated test cases. Now the big advantage here is that you detect build issues immediately and you avoid this schedule killer, which is called a big bang integration at the end. So CI is a very much a best practice when using an offshore development team. If you are a hybrid or subcontract type model, you will have to establish a multi-site replicated development environment. Make sure this environment is exactly the same at both sites. It involves setting up source control, compilers, debuggers, your quality tools, your defect trackers. Use the same hardware platforms. There should be a single build machine, although I've seen it done both ways. But basically avoid the temptation of establishing separate environments and somehow synchronizing that, because that will end up just being a smaller version of the Big Bang integration. And regarding source control, there's a couple of excellent commercial products. The one that I'm most familiar with is IBM's Rational ClearCase. It supports multi-site source control very nicely. There's a new open source one called Subversion, which there is a multi-site version of that, and it's supported by a company called WANDisco, WANDISCO, WANDisco Subversion Multi-Site. Two really good tools to do that. And then finally, a synchronization and communication plan basically defines exactly how the customer, the local team, and the offshore team is going to communicate and remain in synchronization. Final slide on preparing for the project is a rigorous quality plan. Now this is not the classic QA test plan. This is a brief statement on what activities the developers themselves will do to absolutely ensure high quality software. For example, a coding standards document, which coding standards are going to be followed. Code reviews, buddy code reviews are certainly a good practice. If you do buddy code reviews, certainly assign your buddies across the oceanic divide. For example, Joe and the local team would be buddy code reviewer of Paul in the remote team, and vice versa. Static purification. There are a number of excellent tools out there which can show you insights to your code quality. And definition of done is very important, both from a user story perspective and the end of an iteration, and even the end of a project. So a white paper on my website covers that quite nicely also, so feel free to download that. Finally, from a prep perspective, double check the project budget. Make sure you have accounted for the extra cost of the long distance calls, the video services, the infrastructure, the face-to-face meetings, the on-site iteration 1 development, etc. Now, all of this prep activities, you could define all of these prep activities in what we commonly call an iteration 0, which is primarily a positioning iteration to help the other iterations be more successful. And here's a verbal list of some of the things that you can accomplish in an iteration 0. You should get your Agile training done during that. You should establish a project vision. You should develop the initial requirements. You should develop the initial release plan. You should set up TDD, CI, and the multi-site development environment. You should create a communication and synchronization plan. You should create a rigorous quality plan and verify that the budget has the additional cost included. So that's what I've got for preparing for the project. Let me move into the execution of the project, which I've got 5 slides here, so I'm going to have to move pretty fast through these. But I'll start by saying the very best practice for executing a dual shore Agile project is stick with short iterations. The shorter the better. If you can do 1-week iterations, that's pretty incredible. Most iterations I've seen are 2 to 3 weeks. So stick with short iterations. It helps ensure that you see what the offshore team is doing on a regular basis, and you can give feedback and redirect them quickly if anything is amiss. It's a significant risk reducer. The worst thing you can do is basically ask the offshore team to give you the final product back in 6 months, and you basically won't get what you're looking for. So keeping tabs on them and getting in these short iterations is definitely the very best practice. Okay, well, let's talk about building trust. Some executives seem to discount the people aspects of a project. In an agile world, and in my opinion, people are the key. The highest performing teams I've ever seen are those that are based on trust. So you should research the culture of the team that you're integrating with and celebrate that diversity by briefing and training both teams in that. Plan and budget some seed visits where key project members visit the remote site and vice versa, or better yet, both visit each site. Cross-pollination means take a couple of your local team members and plug them into the remote team for a couple of months. And return the favor. Take a couple of your remote team members and plug them into your local team for a couple of months. That goes an incredibly long way in establishing trust, and people get to know each other and their strengths and weaknesses. Rotate that adventure. When the 2 months are up, have another person or two ready to go to fill in. So that can work very nicely like that. As I mentioned before, you should strive to execute the entire first iteration, generally just 2 weeks, with the entire team at one site. If you do that and budget and plan for that, you'll be off and running, and more often than not, your project will be a huge success. Okay, one of the Agile Manifesto tenets is focusing on individuals and interactions. So for every decision, ask yourself, is this for adherence to process or for the benefit of people? So there may be a need to adjust work hours if necessary. One thing I would strongly advise against is asking the remote team to work hours like 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's just not fair. They'll end up naturally disliking Agile methods, and they will certainly underperform. So most offshore teams, it's relatively easy to accommodate at least a 1-hour overlap, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Also plug in a Scrum Master, an Agile Evangelist, or Agile Coach at each team, remote location and local location. And finally, never end an iteration on Friday, because if the remote team, they may end up working late Friday nights every 2 weeks or something.